The bill before Speaker, the Honourable Member Gupta. The bill before us today aims to reduce anthropogenic environmental degradation. In 1975, the words global warming were introduced in the public sphere by US scientist Wallace Broecker. Since then, growing research depicts how rising CO2 emissions and greenhouse gases have warmed the planet. The growth of urbanization has only sped up the deterioration of the planet. With the number of reflective surfaces in the CBD growing, green areas being replaced by buildings, and increasing levels of transportation pollution, cities are becoming conducive to the negative effects of climate change. Climate in Victoria has already warmed by 1 degree Celsius. A rise in the planet's heat by even this seemingly small amount will create irreversible damage to the complex and fragile ecosystems within our state. As a country prone to extreme weather events like droughts, bushfires, and floods, reducing the risks associated with climate change will be vital from now into the future if we are to avoid severe heat waves, rising sea levels, and loss of biodiversity. Currently, the City of Melbourne has set a target of reducing emissions by 4.5% each year as part of their emissions reduction plan. This goal is in line with international measures to limit global temperature rise to under 2 degrees Celsius by 2050. Notable advances made by the state government so far include installing solar panels, planting trees, and greening the city by expanding parks. The next logical step would be to continue greening the city by introducing mandatory rooftop gardens on all government buildings in the CBD. While rooftop gardens have gained popularity as a concept due to urbanization, historical accounts show civilizations in ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Rome using rooftop gardens. And due to expansion of cities, rooftop gardens have become popular in countries like Japan, Singapore, and the United States. Because demarcating land for huge parks is challenging in the CBD, rooftop gardens are seen as a favorable alternative. Rooftop gardens do not absorb as much heat, they capture rainwater to recycle, and they reduce waterway pollution by limiting runoff water, as found in a study that was conducted by the National Research Council of Canada. The purpose of this bill is threefold. Firstly, as suggested by the title, it aims to mandatorily implement rooftop gardens on government buildings in Melbourne CBD. Secondly, the bill aims to reduce the effects of the urban heat island effect. Scientific consensus has recognized that this directly contributes to global warming, as concrete and other building material absorb and retain heat in cities. And finally, the bill aims to involve the wider community in environmental conservation by educating on the benefits of rooftop gardening. This argument will be further elaborated by my teammates. First, Alana will be explaining climate change and its impact on our lives. Next, Olivia will expand upon the jobs such a solution will be able to create. Charlie will be speaking on the health impacts of the initiative, followed by Zach, who will speak on rainwater collection and recycling opportunities. And finally, Terence will explore how metro agriculture has both current and future potential.
Member has concluded. I call the honourable member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Noble. This bill is an ineffective, impractical idea that will not accomplish what it intends. Rooftop gardens within cities are a fantastic idea. To see the juxtaposition of industry and nature is an uplifting sight that brings life into our cities and helps fight pollution and climate change. But I do not believe that the government have considered the implications of their bill. The government write the definition of a government building as any building that is owned by the state of Victoria or the Commonwealth government, and here lies my first issue. These buildings include courts, Parliament House even, places that are historically significant properties protected by heritage laws. Although I think a lush forest atop the Supreme Court would be an amazing installation, it is most certainly not going to happen. I do not believe that this government wish to include these buildings, but a distinction and further clarification of the buildings included is necessary. So obviously government buildings do not just include the historically significant buildings. Many high-rise government buildings could be plausible to build a garden, albeit a small garden, but plants could be planted. The government suggests that these gardens will be a community hub and the planting and maintenance could even be completed by community members. And community members traipsing around our government buildings raises no security concern. Access to many of these places requires special passes, screening, bag checks, metal detectors in some cases. While I love the idea of a small community garden that tenants of an apartment building could access, a government building is not the place to install this. At no place in this bill is security mentioned, and this is a huge issue. Some buildings are accessible by the community and could be feasible, and some aren't. Again, we need further distinction as to which buildings are included. Involving the community introduces a plethora of issues that I can only begin to touch on. As soon as we open the roof of a building to the community, we must take into consideration safety. The building owners will find themselves a target for lawsuits due to any number of accidents that could happen. This is a liability that is very undesirable, and while this idea most certainly has potential, we cannot guarantee the safety of community members. Safety is not mentioned once in this bill. I'm sure all can agree this is a significant issue. When we consider a rooftop garden, accessibility is a big problem. These are created with the intent of community access, so it isn't just like one of those ornamental living buildings you sometimes see. These need to be planned as a community hotspot. I see the government does intend to introduce professional landscapers and architects, but in my opinion, this is insufficient. We don't want just one small, ugly garden bed, which frankly is all a lot of these buildings can fit. No, we want something that this community can come together upon and share. And to build a new building with the intent of having a garden, that is one thing. But to build a new garden atop these buildings never designed to have one seems an effort not worth taking. When we look at existing rooftop gardens within cities, there are three main categories. We have gardens created with the intent of planting produce atop residential buildings, a fantastic idea that does not apply to this bill. We have living walls or roofs created that are meant to bring life to the city on an architectural level and not intended to be accessed. Again, does not apply to this bill. And three, we have gardens built on large balconies or atop large lower level buildings, perhaps on a shopping mall in a very public setting. These gardens have benches, walkways, and are created with the sole purpose of providing a place for community. This third option seems to be what the sponsors intend to create, but I just cannot see this being a realistic goal when we consider that these are government buildings. We must further consider that this bill does not allow for buildings that actually could not physically have a garden atop them. In fact, this bill encourages a mandate that would legally require a garden. If this bill were to pass, there would be no leeway when it comes to cases in which a building is not structurally adequate. And while I encourage gardens where possible, a mandate that cannot be upheld completely compromises the bill. The sponsors hint that some buildings will have different types of gardens, but a hint is all we get. We need a clear-cut plan that gives us a way forward, not just a vague call to action. We, the opposition, believe that resources should be spent to create effective ground level community gardens that are accessible by everyone, don't encroach on government business, and that can be built with significantly less effort. If we are so set on rooftop gardens, a fund that encouraged existing high-rise owners to build gardens would much better suit this initiative. And if government buildings were to be included, an ornamental private building would be much safer, more secure, and do many of the things that the government aims to achieve. I commend the idea the sponsors bring to the table, but this mandate is not realistic.
The honourable member has concluded, and I call the next honourable member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Saunders. I'm sure we all know the effects climate change is having on our environment and our livelihoods. In particular, the buildup of greenhouse gases is increasing global temperatures.
When added to the urban heat island effect, climate change is greatly impacting all of our lives and will only get worse unless we can start acting. Rooftop gardens are a way we can actively reduce heat in built-up cities where space for greenery is limited. The urban heat island effect occurs when areas of natural land are replaced with dense concentrations of concrete and other materials that absorb and retain heat, causing temperatures to increase. Concrete, asphalt, and bricks are absorbed by nature, which means they trap solar radiation during the day and release it as heat during the night. In comparison, the reflective nature of vegetation means it does not absorb heat in the same way, instead converting the heat into water vapor via evapotranspiration. Building rooftop gardens reduces the areas of low reflectivity caused by absorbent building materials and increases the evaporation cycle caused by plants, meaning less heat is trapped in these urban environments. Controlling the impact of the urban heat island effect. Reducing the impact of urban heat islands has many benefits. As well as reducing the ambient temperature during summers that are increasingly hot, it can have economic and health benefits. Excessive exposure to heat can result in heat stroke and heat exhaustion, but reducing the temperature in these urban environments can reduce the risk of heat-related illnesses. In addition, the reduction of heat will mean less requirements for air cooling technologies, saving energy and costs related to powering these cooling mechanisms. This is why it should be mandatory for government buildings to have rooftop gardens, as it will help reduce the impact of global temperature increases caused by climate change.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I call the next Honourable Member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Rich Jones. The opposition would like to point out the importance of community safety, especially with relation to government buildings. The bill fails to acknowledge the monitoring of health and safety risks associated with a rooftop garden. A guide to community gardening in the City of Melbourne states that one essential element to a community garden is health, safety, and welfare. The document indicates that there should be risk assessments to reduce or eliminate potential hazards. This includes addressing areas such as trip hazards from objects left on the ground and also from uneven surfaces. It's also important to have rules about the appropriate storing and use of sharp and mechanical gardening equipment, as well as gardening chemicals such as pesticides and fertilizer. Another area of consideration is the storing of compost and manure so spores and microbial dust can be avoided. These are just some examples of the many risks that can be associated with a community garden. When the garden is then raised to a rooftop, these risks are amplified and there are substantially more health and safety risks involved. An issue often associated with rooftops is the danger of objects falling from the rooftop down to the many people below. In the busy CBD, this could cause danger and would mean the rooftop garden would need to be adequately enclosed in an attempt to prevent this. The Australian environment also contributes to issues with safety for the community. The stifling heat of a summer day would call for shade and a source of drinking water to combat heat stroke or dehydration. This highlights the need for constant evaluation of risk assessments to protect not only those working on the garden, but the wider community of which the garden is supposed to be of benefit. In light of the community inclusion within Clause 7, the government has an obligation to keep the community volunteers safe. Without a health and safety plan, there should be no consideration of community involvement until the risks involved with the rooftop garden have been mitigated. Although a rooftop community garden has good intentions, it's important that the government acknowledges their community's health, safety, and welfare. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Rich Jones. I call the next Honourable Member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Mudd. Mandatory rooftop gardens will also additionally provide employment for a wide range of jobs such as, but not limited to, gardeners and horticulturists. This is vital as these gardens will be added to buildings in the Melbourne CBD, a heavily populated metropolitan region where there will be a lack of job opportunities of the sort in comparison to perhaps regional or rural areas, where it is evidently less suburban and provides more land. People of such professions will gain easier access to a career. Some of these professions include landscape designers, who are required in order to create a viable design for the rooftop gardens, which will only further benefit the community and emerging young people seeking employment, along with professionals with many years of experience in the field. Consultation scientists can provide assistance to the government in making the best decisions and implement and conserve these gardens, and horticultural therapists will work with the community to help support people with physical and mental health problems, gardening being a large part of their treatment. Additionally, suppliers of such vegetation and equipment also benefit, as the gardens will need resources in order to sustain and preserve the gardens to fundamentally provide longevity to them. Furthermore, we all know that due to COVID-19, employment rates have been decreasing. People have been losing jobs, and as of February this year, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, out of 2.2 million people searching for work, 808,000 were unemployed and were seeking employment. Mandatory rooftop gardens can assist in providing people the work they need. Ultimately, this will benefit upcoming as well as experienced professionals in search for employment, being crucial in times where employment rates are decreasing and work is harder than ever to find. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mudd. I call the next honourable member.
Speaker, Honourable Member Thomas. Whilst any efforts to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in our environment is wise, the following bill has failed to consider the structural and architectural issues that can arise with rooftop gardens. No official model of a rooftop garden is available to be followed, meaning constructors will be building blindly, ignoring the safety of those in the building. If the proposed bill passes, allowing rooftop gardens to be built on government buildings in the Melbourne CBD, it must take into account the age of the buildings, with many being constructed in 1870 at the earliest. A significant amount of weight is added to the building when adding pots, pillars, soil and furniture, therefore needing extra reinforcements to ensure the rooftop doesn't collapse in on itself. And although the bill has considered water use and where it will come from, it doesn't mention how the water will leave the rooftop if there is an influx due to rain or likewise. A whole new drainage system will have to be built internally to safely allow excess water to drain, contributing to the overall weight of the building. Water could potentially leak through cracks into the rooftop surface, leading to water damage on paint, or if the building has wooden beams, rotting in the wood. The safety of the building's occupants is vital, and posing any risk to their workplace and livelihoods whatsoever is something nobody has a right to disrupt. Roofing membranes are also needed to prevent leaks in the building, but they can be easily damaged by the thing that they're trying to protect. Shovels, shoe heels, and dropping equipment on the membrane is all that's needed to cause damage and lead to leaks. And if a plant that is in that rooftop garden produces leachate, or a liquid that has dissolved or entrained environmentally harmful substances that may then enter the environment, it could potentially damage the membrane, leaking into the building's crevices and the surrounding environment we are trying so hard to protect. The government has failed to consider the structural implications that could occur because of building rooftop gardens amongst older structures. Any issues that arise will be at fault of an unclear bill which has not provided the needed information to safely control the excessive emissions of carbon in the CBD. Thank you, Speaker.
Member Thomas, I call the next honourable member.
Speaker, Honourable Member Vernon. In accordance with Clause 1, Section C of this bill, these rooftop gardens are intended to be inclusive of the wider community. What I'm addressing will not be literally written into the bill, but instead the advantages and rewards this bill will produce. Whilst it is undeniable that the pandemic has had a negative toll on us, it is in the best interest of the government that this bill be proposed. It will elevate the negative burden on both physical, mental, and social health of individuals. In a Japanese study, viewing plants altered EEG records and reduced fear, stress, anger, and sadness, as well as reducing blood pressure, pulse rate, and muscle tension. In terms of national research, however, Infrastructure Victoria defines and mentions green space, which are areas that publicly accessible, have some vegetation, and generally support some recreational activity. Their inquiry into infrastructure for growing populations researched that green space has been demonstrated to benefit mental health by reducing exposure to urban stresses like noise and boosting the ability to deal with life stresses. And there is evidence that can be used in assisting people with suffering from depression. As was mentioned by the Honourable Member Sanders, the implementation of these gardens will decrease the urban heat island effect, subsequently increasing controlled and fresher temperatures and impacting the physical health of individuals in the CBD. Perpetrating to social health benefits, the social interaction provided by communal and therapeutic garden projects for those with learning disabilities and poor mental health can counteract social isolation. Clauses 7 and 9 further iterate that there is a collaborative aspect of our bill within the community, in case that there is any doubt. Thank you, Speaker.
you, Member Vernon. Call the next honourable member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Chowdhury. The extreme weather conditions of Australia play a crucial role on the ability to create rooftop gardens. Australia is known as a country of extremely warm weather during summer, with an average high of 26 degrees, and temperatures of 29 degrees are considered too hot for a majority of plants. These gardens cannot cover the entirety of concrete roofs, and thus the roofs will continue to absorb the temperature, to absorb the heat, with temperatures soaring over 80 degrees Celsius during Australian summers. This causes the plants to lose water and ultimately die. Therefore, the creation of rooftop gardens will be deemed futile, as plants would be unable to survive. In addition to the previously stated architectural issues, this means that several roofs would have to be specially reconstructed in order to not absorb heat. Furthermore, wind speeds tend to be higher at rooftops due to fewer obstacles to interfere with its flow. Strong winds may result in breakage or damage to the plant, potentially killing it and also blowing away previously planted seeds. This makes the location of a roof difficult to grow plants. Although the bill mentions the utilization of water when an excess amount of water has been collected by rainwater tanks, it fails to recognize what will occur in a situation where there is an insufficient amount of water. Victoria is notorious for irregular weather, and with below average rainfall for the last 2 years, it's difficult to determine if sufficient water for the garden's maintenance will be collected. If the tanks do not collect enough water, where will this water be coming from? Perhaps from our state's own water supply? If so, why should we use Victoria's own precious water supply for plants which are already struggling to survive due to the scorching heat of these roofs, when we can instead use it for agricultural purposes and in the production of electrical power, which are a necessity for all Victorians? Thank you.
Thank you, Member Chowdhury. I call the next honourable member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member St. Pierre. Rooftop gardens, additionally from other benefits, also have a very useful features, as you've heard previously. They can be used to collect rainwater, which is a nearly infinite resource. An average person wastes about 113 liters of water a day. That is water that is gone. Think about it. The toilet, the shower, the hot water for the dishes. It is essential in everyone's day-to-day lives. So why waste all of what we get from nature directly, instead of reducing the cost of processing water for use, reducing water waste? 1 kiloliter costs on average $3. Refuters might think it's not much, but it adds up. In about 1 week, it already gets near that level. The opposition might wonder why I mentioned a low price, but what if I told everyone that it could even be lower? By collecting the rainwater from rooftop gardens for use, this would lead to more available water for those who need it most. And not only this, but you would also pay far less for both your cold and hot water bills, as you already have the resource. $300 can be a lot if we add up electricity and internet bills. So why shouldn't we attempt to save the environment and our money? What if we use that water to fight bushfires, save lives? Or what if we gave it to those who are facing heavy droughts? It is obvious to see that the benefits outweigh the little to no downsides of that huge positive function. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member St. Pierre, and I call the next honourable member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Hunt. The mandatory rooftop gardens on government buildings in the CBD bill should not be enacted because the residential benefits have not been appropriately considered, and there is further need for consultation with residents as to what may be best suited to the local community in terms of need and use. The bill defines community garden and rooftop garden. However, the term garden itself is not defined. It is necessary to define the term garden because it can be interpreted in many ways, and it is important to provide clear parameters of what is and what isn't considered a garden. The bill does not mention the long-term benefits of rooftop gardens for residents specifically. This is important to rectify, because for the bill to be considered adequately, attention needs to be given to all relevant matters, and benefits to residents are important. The wording of Clause 7, societal integration, can be interpreted to say that community consultation will not occur until the gardens have been established. It is paramount that adequate community consultation occurs throughout both the planning and implementation stages and not only after the project has been almost completed. Planning needs to be completed in consultation with the relevant stakeholders, including residents, to determine what the rooftop gardens will contain. If the rooftop gardens are to be used for small-scale food production, there needs to be consideration as to whether this is appropriate for the CBD, or if a space that has outdoor workspaces or a playground will be of better use. This is something that should be up to relevant stakeholders to determine. We are refuting this bill because it seems that there has not been enough consideration given to the community consultation and input from residents. A more appropriate approach would be to implement stakeholder meetings and discussions of plans that could be implemented. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Member Hunt. Hunt, I call the next honourable member.
Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member Asseto. As per the previous sponsors before me, there are many pragmatic and necessary benefits manifested from the implementation of the proposed bill. We can furthermore explore the expedient future of horticulture and agriculture being synonymous with urban culture. The aforementioned can be executed through the introduction of vertical gardening and metro agriculture. Vertical gardening was pioneered by world-renowned French botanist Patrick Blanc. Blanc has created many vertical gardens, which invite nature in an urban setting found on walls of museums, shopping malls, private homes, big hotels, and skyscrapers. His research and work have shown the very benefits that our speakers and bill distinctly indicate in cities including Bangkok, Dubai, New York, and ambitiously Melbourne. Alongside the integration of vertical gardens, another profitable outcome of the bill is metro agriculture. This attachment incorporates the development and trade of agricultural assets within the metropolitan region. From a statistical analysis based on the retail market in the CBD from estate agency Knight Frank, the food retail industry makes up 34% of retail markets present, and that percentage is anticipated to increase post-haste. Furthermore, the population of those living within the city region is at 183,000 as of June 2020. Consequently, the eminent and beneficial production and sustaining of fresh fruit and veg on these rooftop gardens will be a valuable asset to establish and a possible catalyst of trends for fellow building and business owners to implement. These horticultural and agricultural pursuits irrefutably testify that the bill, when passed, will propagate a valuable contribution towards the sustainable and environmental livelihoods within a metropolitan area.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I call the final Honourable Member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Brooke. We think gardens are important, but we're contesting the nature of roof gardens. Gardens are safer on the ground and not in the air. The issue that needs to be addressed is the accessibility to rooftop gardens for all people. Melbourne Councillor Beverly Pinder stated when she was member for the chair of Marketing Melbourne Portfolio, responsible for guiding events, tourism and marketing for the city. She stated, there is considerable variation in individual abilities of each person with a disability. This represents many challenges that we endeavour to address, in which accessibility has not been addressed within the bill that must be deliberated. When the buildings were built in the 19th century, consideration was not taken into what the rooftop would be used for. It is not thought that the building would be used for a community gathering area, let alone people who are not able-bodied who would require extra support in order to use these rooftop gardens. Therefore, if rooftop gardens were open to the public, there would not be the necessary safety measures to support people with disabilities or even the general public. The engineers and architects who were responsible for the designs and plans of these buildings have nugatory thoughts on the topic of roof usage, as these buildings were constructed when Melbourne was just a small town, not the bustling life and home to over 5 million people that it currently is. The duality of the government buildings is that it's not for everyday use by the general public. They are not residential. Thus, having a public rooftop garden on a government building compromises the safety and security of all workers and the general public. If the correct safety measures are not in place, which has not been clarified within the bill about safety and security for all, the general public and for members working and workers working in this building.
Thank you, honourable members, for your contributions. I will now open the debate for further contributions from the floor, and government representatives have a first call. Do we have any further contributions? Excellent. I call the honourable member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Coe. So the opposition has attempted to state that we have not thought through our bill and that our bill is missing many components. However, if the opposition had fully read our bill themselves, they would realise that many of the points that they have stipulated are in fact incorrect. They have stated that our bill does not consider community contribution and in fact ignores the community building these gardens before asking what they think about them. If the opposition would look at clause 7.1b, they would see that the community is heavily involved in the implementation of these gardens. Furthermore, they state that our bill does not consider the safety factors of these gardens and the fact that government buildings are very old and have a particular architecture that needs to be catered for. If the opposition would look at clause 4, they would see that our bill has rectified this by employing many groups that are experts in their field, including not just gardeners, but also engineers and other relevant individuals. These gardens would, furthermore, the existence of gardens are not a new thing. If the ancient civilizations of the Babylons can create, sustain, and have safe rooftop gardens, why can we, a civilization that has far more articulated technology and engineers, not do the same? Rooftop gardens already exist in the Melbourne CBD. So why can we not extend this further to government buildings and set a precedent for further future buildings within our state? Thank you.
Thank you, honourable member. Do we have any further speakers for the opposition? Call the honourable member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Cambertelly-Slee. The government argues that the implementation of rooftop gardens is important for giving people in cities accessible green spaces. However, have the government considered that investing in local parks and green spaces in cities and built-up areas is a more feasible way to bring about these environments and promote landscaping employment? This way, even those who live in buildings that cannot facilitate the construction of rooftop buildings, such as older apartment blocks, are also able to participate in enjoying outdoor spaces. This will encourage tourism by making the CBD more aesthetically pleasing, green infrastructure production, and public health through increased use of bike and walk tracks. Whereas building isolated gardens that hinder upon community engagement and collective environmental appreciation on rooftops will be not beneficial to the Victorian community. The government must consider the concerns of the opposition. Thank you.
Are there further speakers on the government bill?
Speaker, the honourable member, no. I'd just like to point out to the opposition that the primary purpose of this bill is to effectively deal with the effects of urban heat island, which is primarily can be easily reduced by implementing this bill, as the rooftop gardening bill seeks to reduce these effects, which have multitude of positive benefits towards both the community and the local community and the global community, as it will be effectively helping deal with the climate crisis that we are dealing with today. Thank you, Speaker.
Are there further speakers? Government? Are there further speakers for? Yes, here we go. Thank you, honourable member.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Deo. While the bill does have good intentions, mandatory rooftops for all buildings is pretty unfeasible. There are rooftops with satellites and solar panels, so a rooftop garden would not suit those. Thank you, Speaker.
Are there further speakers on behalf of the government? Are there any speakers for the opposition? There are no further speakers. I call on the sponsor of the bill for their right of reply.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Gupta. Today, the government has argued that rooftop gardens be made mandatory on all government buildings in Melbourne CBD. We have explained the employment, health, and sustainability benefits of such an initiative. In their argument, the opposition has called rooftop gardens a, quote, small, ugly garden bed. I have to ask, has the opposition ever seen a rooftop garden? Those well read on the issue would know that rooftop gardens are architectural and landscape wonders. Another point raised by the opposition is that ground level gardens be implemented instead. However, the opposition has failed to consider how challenging it is to secure land for gardens in a busy and populated city like Melbourne. I'd like to see the opposition be able to find a piece of land large enough to build a garden on for me. The opposition has also briefly mentioned security issues. This is a very alarmist argument. Has the opposition been in an office before? Most CBD offices have strong security systems with sign-ins required from all workers and visitors. Government buildings would already be more secure than this, and having public take an elevator directly to the top of the building wouldn't be an issue, unlike what the opposition will have you believe. The opposition's arguments are grasping at straws. While the government acknowledges that there are potential architectural risks to rooftop gardens, most of the opposition's arguments are shallow and grasp at straws. Focusing more on worst-case scenarios, such as damage to plants, risk of rooftop gardens falling on people, notably without a specific example of when this has happened, and lawsuits. Let me ask the Parliament this. Are the minimal risks of rooftop gardens enough to discard the large rewards of such an initiative? Undoubtedly, climate change has become the most pressing problem of the 21st century for everyone, but especially for young people, who will inherit the planet and its problems from the generation before us. Therefore, Madam Speaker and my fellow parliamentarians, I urge you to pass this bill and secure our future. This is the first essential step to ensure in our advance towards this dubious idea of modernity, we don't make irreversible sacrifices.
Thank you, Honourable Member Gupta. The question is that the mandatory rooftop gardens on government buildings in the CBD Bill 2021 now be read a second and a third time. All those of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. Thumbs up or thumbs down in this case. I think the ayes have it. 16 to 10 in favour of the affirmative. Yes, so thank you so much, everyone. Great debate, wonderful contributions. I think the clerk is telling me now that that's the conclusion. So I will do a bit of a wrap up. Firstly, can I thank you all again for your participation in the Youth Parliament debates. It is really important experience, and I'm really pleased to see so many wonderful contributions today. It was an interesting debate, and I thought that there were some excellent arguments made from both sides. You all presented very well. Obviously, you had prepared and done your research. You were very articulate, very professional, and very respectful, which is what I often say to our youth parliamentarians when they are in these debates, that many of our current members of Parliament could learn a lot from you when it comes to respectful behaviour in the Parliament. Quite captivating arguments, I thought, from both sides, and very passionate as well. So well done, everyone. Obviously, there is always a fine balance between presenting an argument, keeping to your time limit, and articulating what you really need to say in the short time that you have. But most of you did a very good job of presenting your arguments in that time frame. The clock is always your enemy when you are in the Parliament. When you have so much to say about a particular issue, or you are debating a bill that you are really passionate about or that you really care about, the time of the clock is not always on your side. So well done, everyone. And it's been a pleasure to be in the chair for this debate today. And I thank you all again. Thank you.
Thank you again, Marie. Thank you for your time. We really, really appreciate the time that you have taken out of your day to come and support us on our journey with our young people at the Youth Parliament this year. Thank you for your support in the past couple of years as well. And we hope to continue this relationship in the future with you as well. I would like to congratulate the Independence team for passing your bill, so congrats. Can we get some reactions